After paying off their mortgage in full, I asked if I could stay for a few weeks while recovering from surgery. My daughter-in-law rolled her eyes and said, "This isn't a charity hospice." My son whispered, "Don't make her angry." The next morning, I found my belongings on the porch in trash bags. She didn't know I still had the deed, and what I did with it left them speechless when they. "This isn't a charity hospice." The words hit me like a physical blow, and I had to grip the edge of the granite countertop to keep from swaying. My abdomen throbbed where the surgical incisions were still healing, each breath sending sharp reminders through my core. I looked at Corrine, my daughter-in-law, standing there with her arms crossed like I was some kind of inconvenience she'd found tracked onto her pristine floors. Then I turned to Adrian, my son, who was suddenly very interested in the pattern of the tile beneath his feet. He wouldn't look at me, he wouldn't even meet my eyes. "Adrian," my voice came out smaller than I wanted it to. "Don't make her angry, Mom," he whispered, still staring at those tiles like they held the secrets of the universe, like I was the problem here. "I'm Leela Verne, and I've made plenty of mistakes in my 62 years on this earth. I can be stubborn as hell, the kind of stubborn that makes me double down even when I know I'm wrong. I've always had too much pride, always needed to prove I could handle everything on my own, never asking for help even when I desperately needed it. When Adrian's father left us when Adrian was just 5, I threw myself into being both parents, working 2 jobs, refusing assistance from anyone because accepting help felt like admitting defeat. That same pride made me pay off Adrian and Corrine's mortgage 2 years ago when Adrian lost his job, and I never told a soul about it. I just quietly transferred the money, satisfied that I could fix their problems without them even knowing how close to the edge they'd been. I never asked for gratitude, never mentioned it, just did it because that's what mothers do, or at least that's what I told myself. Maybe part of me liked being the silent hero, the one who swooped in and saved the day without any fanfare. Maybe my pride needed that secret power, that knowledge that they owed me everything and didn't even know it. But now, standing in their kitchen just 3 days after major surgery, watching my own son refuse to defend me while his wife treated me like a burden, I realized that maybe my stubborn pride had built a wall between us instead of a bridge. I'd never taught Adrian to stand up for himself because I'd always stood up for him. I'd never let him struggle because I'd always fixed everything. And now here we were. "I just need a few weeks to recover," I said, hatting how my voice shook. "The doctor said I shouldn't be alone for at least 2 weeks after the surgery. I thought family." "We have our own lives, Leela," Corrine interrupted, using my first name like we were strangers meeting at a bus stop. "We can't just drop everything because you decided to have surgery. Maybe you should have planned better." Planned better, as if the tumor they'd removed from my uterus had been a scheduled inconvenience rather than an emergency. As if I'd chosen to need help. "Corrine, please," Adrian finally spoke up, but his voice had no strength in it. "Maybe we could." "No, Adrian, we talked about this. We're not running a nursing home." She turned back to me, her eyes cold. "You're welcome to stay tonight, but tomorrow you'll need to make other arrangements." I wanted to scream at them. I wanted to throw my pride in their faces, tell them exactly who had saved this house, this life they were living. But my stubborn nature kicked in, that same pride that had gotten me into this mess, and I just nodded stiffly. I wouldn't beg, I wouldn't grovel. I'd figure it out on my own, just like I always had. That night I lay in their guest bedroom, the mattress too firm and the pillows too flat, every position sending pain radiating through my healing body. I could hear them downstairs, their voices carrying through the vents. I couldn't make out the words, but I heard Corrine's sharp laugh, the sound cutting through the darkness like broken glass. I stared at the ceiling, counting the minutes until morning, my hand pressed against my abdomen where the bandages pulled and itched. When dawn finally came, I gathered my things quietly, moving slowly because every movement was agony. I had just zipped my small suitcase when I heard footsteps outside the guest room door. For a moment I thought maybe Adrian had come to apologize, to tell me he'd talked to Corrine that I could stay after all. Instead, the footsteps passed by without even pausing. I heard the front door open and close. An engine started in the driveway. Adrian was leaving for work, leaving before he had to face me again. I made my way down the stairs, one hand on the railing, one arm wrapped around my middle. When I opened the front door, I found my belongings dumped on the porch. Not just the suitcase I'd packed, but everything. My clothes had been stuffed into black trash bags, the kind you use for yard waste. My medications, the prescriptions I needed for pain and infection, were tossed in with them. A bottle had spilled open, pills scattered across the porch like confetti at the world's most depressing party. I stood there in the morning cold, my pajamas offering no protection against the October wind, and looked at the scene before me. This was what I meant to them. This was what my sacrifice had earned me. Trash bags on a porch. The front door opened behind me, and Corrine stepped out, already dressed in her yoga clothes, a green smoothie in one hand. "I hope you understand this isn't personal," she said, not even having the decency to look uncomfortable. We just need our space. Space, I repeated, the word tasting bitter. Exactly, I'm sure you can find somewhere else to recover, maybe a hotel or something. She took a sip of her smoothie, her eyes already dismissing me, probably planning her day, her workout, her lunch with friends in my dining room. That's when I heard it, that laugh again, light and careless like this was all just a minor inconvenience in her perfect life. Something inside me shifted. The pain in my abdomen seemed distant suddenly, overshadowed by something else, something cold and focused forming in my chest. I reached into my purse, my fingers finding the folded document I always kept there, the deed to this house. I'd meant to transfer it to them eventually after the mortgage was paid off, but I'd been busy with work, then with the cancer diagnosis, and it had just never happened. A small oversight, an administrative detail I'd meant to handle but never got around to. Now, standing on this porch surrounded by trash bags, while my daughter-in-law sipped her smoothie, that oversight felt like destiny. I didn't say anything to Karine. I just called a cab, loaded my trash bags into it when it arrived, and left without looking back. But in my mind, I was already planning. My stubborn pride that had kept me from asking for help was now fueling something else entirely. If they wanted me out, I'd get out, but not the way they expected. The cab driver kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror as I gave him the address to the recovery clinic Dr. Patterson had recommended. I must have looked like hell, pale and sweating, clutching my abdomen while trash bags full of my life took up the rest of the backseat. He didn't ask questions though, and I was grateful for that. I needed the silence to think, to let the cold calculation forming in my mind take shape. At the clinic, a nurse named Delgado checked me in. She was maybe 45, with kind eyes that had seen enough to know when not to ask questions. She helped me into a room, got me settled, checked my vitals and my surgical site. Her hands were gentle, professional, and I felt something crack inside me at that simple kindness. I hadn't cried on the porch. I hadn't cried in the cab. But now, with this stranger's gentle touch, tears started sliding down my face before I could stop them. "It's okay," Nurse Delgado said softly. "The pain medication will help. You're safe here." But she didn't understand. It wasn't the physical pain making me cry. It was everything else. The trash bags, Adrian's silence, Karine's laugh, the casual cruelty of it all. And underneath it, the burning shame that my own stubborn pride had helped create this situation. If I'd been different, if I'd let them know what I'd done for them, would things have gone differently? Or would they have just felt entitled to use me even more? Over the next few days, while my body slowly healed, my mind worked overtime. I couldn't stop thinking about them, imagining them in the house that I'd saved. I checked Karine's social media obsessively, something I'd never done before, watching her post pictures of their renovated kitchen, the new furniture, her friends gathered for brunch at the dining table. Each post was like a knife twisting. She captioned one picture, "Living our best life in our dream home," with a little heart emoji. Our dream home, built on my money, made possible by my sacrifice, and they didn't even know it. I called my lawyer, Harold Ellison. He was 58, been handling my affairs for years, precise and unemotional in the way only lawyers can be. I explained the situation, laying out every detail while he listened without interruption. "So you're saying the deed was never transferred," he said when I finished. "That's correct. And they're under the impression that they own the property. They paid the mortgage, or rather, I paid the mortgage in their names, but the house itself, I let the sentence hang there." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "What exactly are you asking me to do, Leela?" That was the question, wasn't it? What did I want? To hurt them the way they'd hurt me? To teach them a lesson? To prove I still had power? My pride wanted all of those things. My stubborn nature wanted to show them they couldn't just discard me. But underneath it all was something uglier, something I didn't want to acknowledge. I wanted revenge, pure and simple. "I want to know my options," I said carefully. Harold explained them to me. Property law, rights of ownership, eviction procedures. As he talked, I could feel my heart rate picking up, not from fear but from something darker, anticipation. The plan was already forming, pieces clicking into place with a satisfying precision. "Think carefully about this," Harold warned me before we hung up. "Once you start down this road, there's no taking it back, and it will destroy your relationship with your son." "I think Karine already handled that," I said, but his words stuck with me. Was I really going to do this? Was revenge worth losing Adrian forever? My stubborn pride said yes. My wounded heart said yes. But there was a small voice, getting quieter by the day, that asked if maybe I was going too far. If maybe my own flaws, my need to be the hero, my inability to communicate, had contributed to this mess. I pushed that voice down. I was done being reasonable, done being the bigger person, done sacrificing while others took and never even said thank you. I spent hours researching, reading through property law websites, making notes. Nurse Delgado would come in to check on me and find me hunched over my laptop, barely aware of her presence. "You need to rest," she'd say gently. "Let your body heal." But I couldn't rest. My mind was spinning, planning, imagining every detail of what was coming. I played out conversations in my head, anticipating their reactions, preparing my responses. My obsession with Corinne's social media got worse. I'd refresh her page every few hours looking for new posts, studying the pictures like they held clues to some mystery. In one photo, she and Adrian were sitting on the back patio, the one I'd helped them build 3 summers ago, glasses of wine in their hands, sunset behind them. They looked happy, content, completely unaware that their world was about to shift beneath their feet. I knew I should feel guilty about what I was planning. A better person would. A more forgiving person would find another way, but I'd tried being that person. I'd tried being generous and selfless and quiet about my contributions, and it had gotten me thrown out like garbage while I was still healing from surgery. "There's a darkness in you right now," Nurse Delgado said one evening as she was checking my incision. "I can see it. Whatever you're planning, make sure it's really what you want." I looked at her, surprised. "I don't know what you mean." She just gave me a sad smile. "Yes, you do. I've seen that look before. People come in here healing from all kinds of wounds, not just the physical ones. Some of them heal, others just get infected with something worse." She paused, her hands still gentle on my bandages. "I'm not saying don't be angry. You have every right. I'm just saying be careful that your anger doesn't become the thing that destroys you instead of them." Her words haunted me that night. Was I destroying myself? Was this obsession, this need for revenge, eating me alive from the inside out? My pride wouldn't let me admit it, but I could feel something shifting in me, something that scared me a little. I'd always been stubborn, but this was different. This was calculating. Cold. I barely recognized myself. But then I'd think about that laugh. Corinne's careless, dismissive laugh. The trash bags on the porch. Adrian's silence. And the cold calculation would solidify again, pushing aside any doubts. I called Harold back. "I want to move forward." "You're sure?" "I'm sure. It's going to take a few weeks to get everything in order. Paperwork, notices, legal procedures. Are you prepared for that?" "I've waited this long. I can wait a little longer." And I could. In fact, the waiting made it better somehow. Sweeter, knowing what was coming while they had no idea. I'd watch Corinne's posts, see her planning a holiday party at the house, talking about Christmas decorations and family traditions, and I'd smile. Plan all you want, I'd think. Make yourself at home. It won't last. My physical healing progressed faster than my emotional wounds. By the 3rd week, I was moving around easily, the pain mostly gone except for occasional twinges. Dr. Patterson was pleased with my progress. She signed off on my discharge from the clinic, and I moved into a small furnished apartment I'd rented temporarily. It was sparse and impersonal, but I didn't care. It was just a place to sleep while I waited for Harold to finish the paperwork. Adrian called me once during this time, just once. I saw his name on my phone and my first instinct was to answer, to hear his voice, to hope that maybe he was calling to apologize. But my stubborn pride kicked in. If he wanted to apologize, he could do it in person. He could come find me. I let it go to voicemail. He didn't leave a message. That silence hurt worse than anything Corinne had said. It confirmed what I already knew. He'd chosen her. He'd chosen his comfortable life. He'd chosen to stay quiet rather than defend his mother. And that knowledge hardened something in me that had almost softened. Finally, Harold called. "Everything's ready. The paperwork is filed. We just need to serve them with notice." "When?" "I can have someone there tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow," I repeated, testing the word. After all these weeks of planning and waiting, it was finally happening. "Okay, tomorrow." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my rented bed, staring at the ceiling, my heart racing. Part of me was excited, anticipating their faces when they realized what was happening. Part of me was terrified of what this meant, the line I was crossing, the relationship with Adrian that I was probably destroying forever. And part of me, the part I didn't want to acknowledge, felt empty, hollow. Like the revenge I'd been planning was going to leave me just as alone as I already was, just with the satisfaction of knowing I'd hurt them back. Was it worth it? Was proving a point, asserting my power, showing them they couldn't just discard me, was that really going to make me feel better? Or was Nurse Delgado right? Was I just infecting my wounds with something worse? I pushed those thoughts away. It was too late for doubts now. The wheels were in motion. Tomorrow morning they'd get served with papers explaining that they needed to vacate the property, that the house they thought they owned, the house they'd thrown me out of, wasn't actually theirs, that I still held the deed, and I was exercising my legal right to reclaim my property. And then what? What happened after the revenge? After the satisfaction faded? After they were gone and I was alone in that house, or more likely, after I sold it because I couldn't bear to live there with all those memories. I didn't have answers to those questions. All I had was the cold, hard satisfaction of knowing that tomorrow morning, everything would change. They'd feel what I felt. That sudden shift, that ground falling away beneath their feet, that realization that the life they thought was secure was actually built on sand. My stubborn pride told me this was justice. My wounded heart told me this was necessary. But somewhere deep down, in a place I couldn't quite reach anymore, a voice whispered that maybe this was just pain creating more pain, that maybe revenge wasn't the same thing as healing, that maybe I was about to win a battle but lose something much more important. I silenced that voice. I'd made my choice. Tomorrow. They'd pay for what they did to me, and if it cost me everything, well, what did I really have left to lose anyway? The morning arrived grey and cold, matching my mood perfectly. I got dressed carefully, choosing a simple black pantsuit that made me look professional and put together. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. I wasn't going to show up looking like the broken woman they'd thrown out. I was going to show up looking like someone who held all the power, because I did. Harold met me 2 blocks from the house at exactly 9 in the morning. With him were 2 other professionals, witnesses and support for the legal proceedings. We drove to the house together, and I felt my heart start to pound as we pulled into the driveway. The driveway I'd walked so many times, the house I'd saved, the home that should have been a sanctuary but instead had become the site of my deepest betrayal. "Are you ready?" Harold asked, and I nodded, not trusting my voice. We walked up to the front door, the same door I'd been pushed out of just weeks ago, and Harold knocked. Firm, official knocks that echoed like judgment. I stood slightly behind him, my hands clasped in front of me to keep them from shaking, not from fear, from anticipation, from the knowledge that in a few seconds everything would change. The door opened and there was Corinne, her face showing irritation at being interrupted. She was wearing expensive loungewear, her hair perfect despite the early hour, a coffee mug in her hand. When she saw me standing there behind Harold and his colleagues, her expression shifted from irritation to confusion. "What is this?" Her voice was sharp, but I heard the uncertainty underneath it. "Mrs. Hale," Harold said formally, "I'm Harold Ellison, attorney at law. I'm here on behalf of my client, Leila Verne, regarding this property." "Property? What are you talking about?" Corinne's eyes darted to me, then back to Harold. "Leila, what is this?" I stepped forward, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "It's a correction." "A what?" She was starting to look angry now, her face flushing. I held out the document I'd been carrying, the deed that had lived in my purse for so long. "This house isn't yours, Corinne. It's mine. It always has been." "That's not possible. We own this house. We paid." "You paid the mortgage," I interrupted, and God, it felt good to interrupt her for once. "A mortgage that I paid off in your name. But the deed, the actual ownership of this property, was never transferred to you. Check your records, you'll see." Adrian appeared behind Corinne then, obviously having heard the commotion. When he saw me, his face went pale. "Mom, what's going on?" "Tell him, Corinne," I said, my voice cold. "Tell him how you threw his mother out on the porch while she was recovering from surgery. Tell him about the trash bags. Tell him about that laugh." "You can't do this," Corinne said, but her voice had lost its confidence. "This is our home. We live here. You can't just—" "I can," I cut her off. "And I am. Mr. Ellison has served you with official notice. You have 30 days to vacate the property." 30 days? Adrian's voice cracked. He looked at me like he didn't recognize me, and maybe he didn't. Maybe I didn't recognize myself anymore either. "Mom, please, we can talk about this. I'm sorry about what happened. I should have stood up for you. I know that now, but you can't throw us out. This is our home." "Was it my home when you threw me out?" I asked him directly, finally looking my son in the eye. "Was I family when your wife called me a charity case? When she dumped my medication on the porch with the trash? Where were you then, Adrian? Where was your voice?" He couldn't answer. He just stood there, his face crumbling, and I saw the little boy I'd raised, the child I'd protected and provided for. For a moment, my resolve wavered. This was my son, my only child. Was revenge really worth losing him? But then Corinne spoke again. "This is ridiculous. You can't do this. I'll call my lawyer. We'll fight this." And just like that, my resolve hardened again. "Fight it all you want. The deed is in my name. The law is on my side. You threw me out when I was at my most vulnerable, and now you're going to understand what that feels like." Harold stepped in then, his voice professionally neutral. "Mrs. Hale, Mr. Verne, everything is outlined in these documents. You're welcome to consult your own attorney, but I assure you, the law is clear on this matter. Ms. Verne is the legal owner of this property and has every right to reclaim it." "Reclaim it?" Corinne's voice was rising now. She gave it to us. She paid off our mortgage as a gift. A gift of payment, yes, Harold agreed, but the property itself was never transferred. An oversight perhaps, but legally binding nonetheless. You planned this, Corinne said, turning to me with venom in her eyes. You planned this all along. You wanted to have this power over us. The accusations strung because part of it was true. Maybe not consciously, maybe not from the beginning, but yes, I'd kept the deed in my name. My stubborn pride, my need to maintain some control, my inability to fully let go. And now that oversight had become a weapon. I planned to help you, I said quietly. I planned to be there for my son when he needed me. I planned to sacrifice for my family. What you did with that generosity, that was your choice, and this is mine. Mom, please, Adrian tried again, his voice desperate now. Don't do this. We'll apologize. We'll make it right. Just give us a chance. I gave you a chance, I said. I asked for a few weeks while I recovered. That was my chance. You chose Corinne's comfort over my health. You chose silence over standing up for your mother. You made your choice, Adrian. Now I'm making mine. But where will we go? He sounded lost, confused, like he couldn't quite process what was happening. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe you should ask your wife. Maybe she can tell you about space and arrangements and not running a charity. Maybe she has some suggestions about where people should go when they're not wanted in their own family's home. The words came out more bitter than I'd intended, my voice sharp with all the hurt I'd been carrying. Corinne's face was red now, anger and humiliation warring in her expression. You're a vindictive, bitter old woman, she spat at me. Adrian told me you were difficult, that you always had to be in control, but I didn't realize how truly toxic you were. Her words should have hurt, but instead they just made me feel tired. Tired of being the villain in her story when I'd been trying to be the hero. Tired of my own stubborn pride that had led me to this moment. Tired of the whole mess. 30 days, I repeated. The legal notice is served. Mr. Ellison will handle the paperwork. I turned to leave, then paused. And Adrian, when you pack your things, check the porch first. You might want to invest in some trash bags. I hear they're very effective for moving. The petty cruelty of that last comment left a bad taste in my mouth even as I said it, but I couldn't help myself. My wounded pride needed that final jab, that last word. I walked back to the car with Harold and his colleagues, my back straight, my head high, refusing to look back at them standing in the doorway of the house that would soon no longer be theirs. In the car, Harold was quiet for a long moment before he spoke. That wasn't easy. No, I agreed, it wasn't. Do you feel better? That was the question, wasn't it? Did I feel better? Vindicated? Satisfied? I'd gotten my revenge. I'd shown them they couldn't just discard me. I'd proven I had power, that I wasn't just some old woman they could throw away when convenient. But did I feel better? I don't know, I admitted. The truth was, I felt empty. The anticipation, the planning, the imagining of this moment, all of that had sustained me for weeks. But now that it was done, now that I'd seen Adrian's face crumble and heard the desperation in his voice, I just felt hollow. This wasn't healing. This was just transferring pain from one person to another. But I couldn't take it back now. The wheels were in motion. The legal process had begun. In 30 days, they'd be out and the house would be mine again. And then what? Over the next few weeks, I watched from a distance as they scrambled. Corinne's social media went silent, the carefully curated posts of her perfect life suddenly stopping. I heard through my neighbor, Mrs. Klein, who was watching the whole drama unfold with barely disguised glee, that they were looking at apartments, that moving trucks had been coming and going, that there had been several loud arguments audible from the street. Such a shame, Mrs. Klein said to me one day when I drove by to check on the property's condition. They seemed like such a nice young couple, though I always thought that Corinne had a bit of an attitude, too good for the neighborhood, you know, always acting like she was doing us a favor by living here. I didn't respond to her gossip, but I absorbed it anyway. Part of me wanted to know every detail of their suffering. Part of me hated myself for wanting that. Adrian called me several times during those weeks. Unlike before, I answered. Not because I wanted to talk to him, but because some part of me needed to hear his voice, needed to know if he would finally stand up, finally say something that would make this all worthwhile. Mom, please, he said in the first call, his voice thick. Please reconsider. We're trying to find a place, but everything is so expensive, and with my current job I can barely. You should have thought of that before, I interrupted, my voice harder than I felt. I know I should have stood up for you. I should have told Corinne she was wrong. I was weak and I'm sorry, but please don't punish both of us for my mistakes. Both of you, the words sparked something in me. You're still defending her, even now. I'm not defending her, I'm just saying. You're married to her, Adrian, I get that, but she threw your mother out while I was recovering from surgery. She laughed about it, and you said nothing. You did nothing. That's not just her mistake, that's yours too. I know, his voice broke. I know, and I'm sorry. I don't know how many times I can say it. I was wrong. I was a coward. But Mom, this is going to destroy my marriage. Maybe it should, I said, and heard him gasp on the other end of the line. Maybe a marriage built on such casual cruelty isn't worth saving. You don't mean that. But I did mean it. In that moment, I absolutely meant it. I wanted his marriage to fall apart. I wanted him to suffer the way I'd suffered. I wanted him to understand that there are consequences for standing by while someone you love gets hurt. 30 days, Adrian, I said. The clock is ticking. I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking. My stubborn pride was satisfied, but the rest of me felt sick. What was I doing? What had I become? Nurse Delgado's words came back to me. Be careful that your anger doesn't become the thing that destroys you instead of them. Too late, I thought, way too late. The 30 days came and went. On the final day, I drove to the house to do the final inspection before I signed the papers to sell it. Yes, sell it. I decided weeks ago that I didn't want to live there. The house was tainted now, full of too many memories, too much pain. I'd sell it, take the money, and start over somewhere else. Maybe by the ocean, somewhere peaceful where I could try to forget this whole ugly chapter. When I pulled up, the house looked empty. The furniture was gone, the windows dark. Mrs. Klein from next door was standing on her lawn, arms crossed. Watching like this was her personal entertainment. They left this morning, she called over to me. Had a big moving truck. The wife was crying. Your son looked like death warmed over. Quite the scene. Thank you, Mrs. Klein, I said stiffly, not wanting to hear more but unable to stop myself from asking. Did they say where they were going? Some apartment across town, much smaller from what I heard. 1 bedroom, I think, such a downgrade. She shook her head. But I suppose that's what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you, isn't it? I walked up to the house, my key ready, and let myself in. The emptiness was striking. Every room echoed with absence. In the living room, there were faint squares on the walls where pictures had hung. In the kitchen, the granite counter I'd gripped that day when Corinne delivered her cruel words gleamed, spotless and impersonal. I walked through room after room, my footsteps loud in the silence, and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph, just emptiness. In the guest room where I'd stayed that final night, I found something they'd left behind. A photo frame face down on the floor. I picked it up and turned it over. It was a picture from Adrian's college graduation, the two of us smiling, my arm around his shoulders, his diploma in his hand. We looked happy, proud, like a team. I stared at that photo for a long time, tears blurring my vision. When had it all gone so wrong? When had I become someone who could systematically dismantle her own son's life and call it justice? My phone rang. It was Adrian. I almost didn't answer, but some part of me, the part that was still his mother underneath all the hurt and anger, couldn't ignore him. We're out, he said when I answered. His voice was flat, emotionless. The house is empty. Is that what you wanted to hear? Adrian. No, let me finish. You won, Mom. You proved your point. We hurt you, so you hurt us back. You wanted us to feel what you felt, and congratulations, we do. Corinne has barely stopped crying for 3 days. I can barely afford the apartment we're moving into. We had to sell most of our furniture because it won't fit. You've successfully destroyed everything we built. I hope it was worth it. You destroyed it first, I said, but my voice had no strength behind it. You threw me out. Yeah, we did, and it was wrong. It was cruel and selfish, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But this, his voice rose. This is worse, Mom. What we did was thoughtless. What you did was calculated. You planned this. You waited. You watched us scramble. That's not justice. That's revenge. And it's cruel in a way that makes what we did look like nothing. His words hit me like physical blows. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, to explain that I'd been justified. But was I? Had my stubborn pride and need for vindication made me into something worse than the people who hurt me? Where does this leave us? I asked quietly. I don't know, Mom. I honestly don't know. I'm so angry at you right now. So hurt, but you're still my mother. I still love you, even though I'm not sure I like you very much right now. He paused. Maybe we both need some time. Maybe we both need to figure out who we want to be, because whoever we are right now, this version of us, it's not working. He hung up before I could respond, and I stood alone in that empty house, holding a photo of happier times, and finally let myself cry. Not tears of victory or satisfaction, but tears of loss. I'd gotten my revenge, but what had it cost me? My relationship with my son, probably forever. My self-respect, definitely. Any moral high ground I might have claimed. All of it gone, sacrificed on the altar of my wounded pride and stubborn refusal to take the higher road. I called Harold and told him to proceed with the sale. I didn't want anything to do with this house anymore. Let someone else make happy memories here. Mine were all poisoned now. The house sold quickly for a good price. I took the money and put it toward a small condo near the ocean, just like I'd planned. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a new chapter, a chance to heal and move forward. But healing, I discovered, wasn't as simple as changing locations. The ocean was beautiful, peaceful, therapeutic. But I was still me, still carrying the weight of what I'd done, still haunted by Adrian's words and the look on his face when he realized I was really going to go through with it. Karine sent me a letter about 3 months after they moved out. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was 4 pages long, handwritten and brutally honest. It started with an apology, a real one, not the kind of non-apology people give when they're just trying to make themselves feel better. She admitted what she'd done was cruel. She explained, not to excuse but to give context, that she'd been stressed about money, about Adrian's job situation, about feeling like they were always struggling. She said she'd taken out her frustration and fear on me, the one person who'd actually been helping them, and that she'd realized too late how toxic that was. But then the letter shifted. She talked about the aftermath, about how the eviction had destroyed their finances, their stability, their marriage, about how Adrian had fallen into a depression, how he barely spoke to her, how he looked at her sometimes with such resentment, about how they were in counseling now, trying to save what was left of their relationship, but she wasn't sure it was savable. And then came the line that cut the deepest. You wanted us to understand what it felt like to be thrown away. Mission accomplished, Leela. But at what cost? You destroyed us to prove a point, and in the process, you destroyed the one thing that could have been repaired with time and communication. You made yourself into the villain of our story, and now that's all Adrian sees when he thinks of you. Was it worth it? I folded the letter carefully and put it away. Was it worth it? That question had become the soundtrack of my life. Every morning I woke up in my beautiful condo by the ocean, I asked myself that. Every time my phone didn't ring because Adrian wasn't calling, I asked myself that. Every time I saw my reflection in the mirror and barely recognized the hard, cold woman staring back at me, I asked myself that. The answer, I realized with a clarity that came too late, was no. No, it wasn't worth it. Revenge had given me temporary satisfaction but permanent regret. I'd won the battle but lost everything that mattered. I tried to reach out to Adrian several times over the following months. Texts, calls, even a letter of my own. Sometimes he responded with brief, polite messages. Most times he didn't respond at all. On his birthday, I sent him a card with money, like I'd done every year since he was a child. He sent it back with a note that said, "I don't want your money, Mom. I never did. I just wanted my mother." That note sat on my kitchen counter for weeks. I'd read it every morning with my coffee, letting it stab at me, a reminder of everything I'd lost in my quest for vengeance. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my whole life being stubborn, refusing help, maintaining control through my pride and independence. And in the end, that same stubborn pride had destroyed the one relationship that mattered most. I taught Adrian to need me, then punished him when he did. I'd saved their house, then took it away to prove I could. I'd been the hero and the villain of my own story, and I couldn't figure out which role I hated more. It's been a year now since I evicted them. A year of living by the ocean, watching the waves, trying to find some kind of peace or understanding or redemption. I still check Karine's social media sometimes, though she posts rarely now. When she does, the pictures are different. Smaller apartment, simpler life. Adrian looks older in the photos, worn down by everything that happened. Last week, I got an unexpected visitor. Adrian showed up at my door, unannounced, looking nervous. We sat on my patio overlooking the ocean, 2 strangers who used to be family, and tried to figure out if there was anything left to salvage. "I'm not here to forgive you," he said eventually. "I'm not there yet, maybe I never will be," but Karine pointed out something in therapy that I couldn't ignore. "What's that?" I asked, my voice careful. "That you learned the behavior from me, the cutting people out when they hurt you, the nuclear option instead of communication. I did it to you first when I let Karine throw you out. I chose silence and avoidance over confrontation. You learned that from watching me, from all those years I never stood up to Dad when he was still around, from the way I always took the easy path even when it wasn't the right one." He looked at me with sad eyes. "We're both messed up, Mom. We both hurt each other. The question is whether we want to be messed up together or messed up apart." I thought about Nurse Delgado's warning, about Harold's concern, about Karine's letter. I thought about all the chances I'd had to choose differently, to take the higher road, to be the bigger person. And I thought about all the ways my stubborn pride had convinced me that revenge was the same thing as justice. "I want to be messed up together," I said finally. "If you'll let me, but Adrian, I need you to know something. What I did, it was wrong. Not just the eviction, but all of it. The control, the secret help, the keeping the deed in my name. I was so busy being the hero that I never let you be your own person. And when you hurt me instead of talking to you about it, I went for the throat. That's on me, all of it. It was the first time I'd truly admitted it, out loud, without justification or defense. Just the plain truth. I'd been wrong. My stubborn pride had convinced me otherwise for so long, but sitting there with my son, seeing the damage I'd caused, I couldn't hide behind it anymore. We talked for hours that day, about everything. About the past, about our mistakes, about how we both needed to change. It wasn't healing, not yet, but it was a start, a small crack in the wall we'd built between us. He left with a promise to come back next month. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but possibility. A chance that maybe, if we both worked at it, if we both faced our flaws and tried to be better, we might someday find our way back to being a family. The house sold to a young couple with a baby. I heard they're happy there, making new memories untainted by bitterness and revenge. Sometimes I drive by, just to look at it, to remember what I almost destroyed completely in my quest to prove a point. The money from the sale sits mostly untouched in my bank account. Blood money, in a way, the price of my pride. I donated a significant portion to a housing charity, helping families who are struggling to keep their homes. It seemed fitting somehow. A small act of redemption for the massive act of destruction I'd committed. Karine and I will probably never be friends. We'll probably never even be comfortable around each other. But last week she sent me a text. Just 3 words. Thank you, Leela. I didn't ask what she was thanking me for. Maybe for finally admitting I was wrong. Maybe for trying to rebuild with Adrian. Maybe just for not getting in the way anymore. It doesn't matter. Those 3 words meant more than any revenge ever could. I stand on my patio every morning now, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise over the ocean. It's beautiful, peaceful, everything I wanted when I moved here. But beauty and peace don't erase regret. They don't undo damage. They don't make revenge worth the cost. If I could go back to that day on the porch, trash bags at my feet, Karine's laugh echoing in my ears, would I choose differently? I want to say yes. I want to believe I'd be strong enough to take the higher road, to communicate instead of retaliate, to heal instead of wound. But I'm not sure. That's the thing about stubborn pride and wounded hearts. They make monsters of us all if we let them. What I do know is this: revenge might feel like justice in the moment, but it's really just pain creating more pain. It's the easy choice disguised as the righteous one. And when the dust settles and you're standing in the wreckage you've created, you realize that destroying someone else didn't heal you. It just made 2 broken things instead of 1. The deed sits in a safety deposit box now, no longer a weapon but a reminder. A physical representation of the power I wielded and the damage I caused. Sometimes I take it out and look at it, remembering the day I stood on that porch with Harold, watching my son's face crumble, feeling both vindicated and empty. That emptiness never really goes away, but maybe it's not supposed to. Maybe it's meant to remind me of who I don't want to be, of the cost of letting pride and stubbornness rule my choices. Maybe it's the price I pay for choosing revenge over redemption. Adrian and I are slowly, carefully building something new from the ashes of what was destroyed. It's fragile and uncertain, and some days I wonder if it's even possible. But we're trying. And trying, I've learned, is sometimes the bravest thing you can do. Braver than revenge. Braver than pride. Braver than proving you're right even when it makes you the villain of your own story. The ocean keeps rolling in, washing away and bringing new things with each tide, and I stand here watching, hoping that someday it will wash away enough of this regret that I can finally recognize myself again in the mirror. Not the hero I tried to be, not the villain I became, but just a flawed human who made terrible choices and is now trying to live with the consequences. That's the real ending to my revenge story. Not triumph, not justice served, but just the quiet, painful understanding that sometimes winning means losing everything that actually matters.